so in this video for HSC PDHPE, option for improving performance, we are looking at the next stop point, which is initial planning considerations. So on the left-hand side of the syllabus, today we're going to go through the performance and fitness needs for individuals and teams, the schedule of events and competitions, and climate and season. On the right-hand side, we're going to describe the specific considerations of planning for performance in events and competitions, and how would that differ for elite athletes and recreational/amateur participants. Let's do it. All right, so our first dash is looking at performance and fitness needs. So remember, we're taking this from our initial planning considerations. We're planning out our training sessions, we're planning out our training year, and we're going to look at the performance and fitness needs of our athletes, whether they're an individual athlete or a team athlete. And so I am going to tackle this from an amateur recreational perspective and an elite perspective in case you get a question on that in the HSC. So an effective coach generally will plan, organise and implement training programs to best match the needs and goals of their athlete or athletes. And what I mean by that is, for example, the very start of a season, the soccer team gets together with the coach, you sit down and you're like, okay, right guys, what's our goal for the year? Or what's our goal for the season? Is the goal simply just to have fun with your mates, all right? And have a few beers after a game, attend a training session maybe once a week, but that training session will just be more like games as opposed to drills, etc. Or do we actually want to win, the tournament? If winning's the goal, then performance and fitness needs, and as far as our planning goes, is going to be more important than if fun's the goal. Fun's the goal, it doesn't matter. Winning's the goal, then we probably need to be doing some testing, baseline testing, some fitness testing, skills, drills, etc. to make the players better and therefore hopefully win. It's sort of not effective to push a team or an athlete through a rigorous training regime when that's not their goal. They're not going to get much out of it. You're going to end up being a frustrated coach and you both don't get what you want. Therefore, the coach should involve athletes in this process to ensure that the training aims match the individuals' and teams' goals. Now, for an amateur or recreational athlete, okay, fitness needs, so performance and fitness needs, may not actually be a major consideration, as they generally participate for enjoyment, all right? So I personally don't play team sports. I'm not a team sport kind of guy. I take it a little bit too seriously and I get really upset when people stuff up, and I get really upset for myself when I stuff up. So I don't play team sports. However, my two good mates are team sports. They both play soccer. Anyway, they both fit into the amateur recreational category. They have one training session a week during soccer season, and I think one of my mates attends every single time, and the other mate, half, maybe a quarter of the time. He just sees what's happening that day and how he feels, right? Either way, it doesn't matter, okay? Because there's no rigorous requirement for them to then go and play on the weekend or in the weeknight, whatever. So they may attend training once a week. It's not mandatory. There's no punishments if they don't. They'll just be like frowned upon or whatever. Okay, this is all fine. Now you're going to get levels of this. So the more, if you ever played team sports before, they generally have a grading system. Okay, so like when I used to play cricket way back in the day, if you basically played third grade and under, your mandatory training for the week was 0. If you played second grade, you were required to attend one training session, and if you didn't attend a training session that week, you would be dropped the following week to third grade. And if you played first grade, you'd need to attend 2 training sessions a week. And if you didn't attend your 2 training sessions a week, you would be dropped to second grade, etc. So that was one of the requirements that my cricket club put on its players. And it was very clear and everyone adhered to it, and so if you wanted to be at the top level or in those top teams, you needed to attend the training. End of story. For elite athletes though, things are different. So and when I say elite athletes throughout this video and throughout this unit, I'm not talking about like good athletes in your current teams. I mean like elite athletes, and we do have some in our class. Elite athletes are those that are above and beyond. They're selected in representative sides. They have potential to be paid for their involvement in the sport. They get sponsorships. They get selected in top level things so all the people at the Olympics currently, because some few of them are during the Olympics, would be elite athletes. They are the best of the best, okay, in their sports. If you happen to play for a local club here in Newcastle at Macquarie and you are paid to play by that club, and some players are, they would also be considered elite athletes because part of them being paid is part of them having to maintain things such as performance and fitness needs. So we look at our elite athletes now. They're going to have specific fitness and performance benchmarks and needs for their position, for their sport, for however frequently they play per week. If those needs are not addressed, athletes may be dropped, okay, like the example I just gave in cricket. They might be benched, all right, or they just might be not selected in the first place, or they may lose their sponsorships or lose their payments if their needs are not met. So therefore, elite athletes will generally have mandatory training sessions in the week. This can be 5 to 6 times in the week. Generally, they won't make you train 7 times a week because that's bad, but it can be up to 5 or 6 times per week. And in some cases, it may even be twice a day. Now, twice a day doesn't mean you're going to do like a hardcore intense aerobic session in the morning and hardcore intense aerobic session in the evening. It might be flexibility and skills in the morning and aerobics in the evening, or it might be strength in the morning and then it might be aerobics in the evening. They won't generally make you do the same thing twice in the same day to hit the same goal, but they can get more training sessions in if you are being paid to do it. So the argument, therefore, is that, well, if we're paying you to play for our club, then you don't need a job. Your job is now to train. You train you attend all your training sessions, you do 2 a days, and therefore that will make you, well, it will ensure that your performance and fitness needs for your position, for your sport, etc., are not only improved, but they're maintained, and therefore you will hopefully play at the best that you can. So that's performance and fitness needs. All right, so next stage is looking at the scheduling of events and competition and how that should impact on the initial planning considerations. So first of all, we need to take into account 2 types of plans. Our first one's going to be our annual plan, right, being a year. So coaches should consider the annual plan to consider training blocks to allow athletes to peak for their competition. Now, if you're a team sport player and you just play in one country, so think of like NRL teams in Australia, they need to peak during the winter months and then they have an off season over the summer months, okay? So the coach for NRL teams will consider this in their annual plan and they'll, gradually build up training and do different types of training during in-season stuff as opposed to off-season stuff. And we will actually go into what happens in-season, off-season and how to peak in one of our later videos in this topic. So that's the first type of plan, an annual plan. Now, if you're an international athlete, okay, so you're still a seasonal athlete, but you travel all around the world, which means that you will experience those seasons all throughout the year, not just once in your country. So international athletes may have to peak at various times of the year, not just for the in-season in Australia, okay? So my example for this one is like tennis players. Tennis is generally what we consider a summer sport. It's very hard to play tennis in the rain and snow, so we class it as a summer sport. But there are multiple tennis cups, tournaments, opens, etc. all around the world, and players can enter those cups, tournaments, opens, etc. to win money, etc. because that's their livelihood. So therefore, players must peak several times throughout the year, okay, in the multiple summers of the countries that they travel to play tennis for their various tournaments, as opposed to just peaking once in the year for like the Australian Open. Now, on top of our annual plan, we need to consider a weekly plan. Now, this one is going to be more specific to team sports in season, right? So our weekly plan is to ensure training is effective, but it doesn't impact on competition days. That says days, by the way. And it's important for team sports in season, all right? Now, what I mean by impacting on competition days is the fact that if you train hard and you train hard enough, you should be sore. You should need some recovery, not only physically, psychologically, mentally. So remember your recovery strategies from Core 2. So an effective coach will look at the schedule of events, look at the schedule of competition, and then plan the weeks accordingly. So let's look at one example for a team sport. Think NRL player again. They know they're going to play next Saturday, all right? They've been scheduled, Dragons, Bulldogs, Dragons will smash them. Yes, I'm a Dragon supporter. Next Saturday. So then the coach goes, right, let's plan our training week. We're going to leave Sunday, the day after, for rest and recovery. That's important, all right? Because you guys should be giving it your all on Saturday. You can have basically a day of active recovery. So they'll design things, like a swim at the beach or in the baths or some acroaerobics, stuff like that, good for recovery, right? The day before, we're going to do skills and tactics, all right? So nothing too intense, not intense on our muscles, not intense aerobically, so the body is not fatigued. But we are going to do some things that will hopefully fine tune what we end up running with on the Saturday. And then that leaves the other days of the week, Monday to Thursday. That's when we're going to do our fitness development. So Monday to Thursday will be all about strength and conditioning and aerobic work. Friday, we're going to do skills and tactics. That will also give us a day's rest physically. Then we're going to rest in the morning and then play in the afternoon on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we're going to have a rest and recovery sessions. I'll rub this off and then I'll show you how the scheduling of events and competition stuff will differ for amateur and elite athletes. All right, so when we look at amateur and recreational athletes for our scheduling of events competition and how that impacts on your planning. So generally planning annually for our recreational athletes is generally unnecessary, okay? Weekly training session should be enough. And it should generally be placed halfway between comp days. So if you played on Sunday last week and you're going to play on Saturday next week, you can have a training session on about Wednesday, all right? And generally most clubs will then just say, let's just train on Wednesday if we always play on weekends, all right? It's still important to put the training session away from play to allow recovery, rest, etc. Because remember, these guys aren't as fit as they are elite athletes, so they are going to take a little bit longer to recover. And the training session they do attend is more than likely optional anyway, all right? They will generally also have no or minimal requirements to maintain their fitness in the off season, okay? No one's going to test them at the start of the season and say, oh, how much points on the beep test did you drop in the off season if you're a recreational athlete, okay? None of that is generally going to be considered or enforced. As you start progressing up grades and stages, as we talked about before, those will become more like these ones here. So our elite athletes, on the flip side, they need to maintain a low, and I'll put it in brackets, lower level of performance and fitness in the off season to minimize redevelopment requirements in the pre-season, okay? And when I talk about phases of competition, these words will make a little bit more sense. So basically an elite athlete, so let's look at an NRL player again. NRL player does not need to maintain the same level of performance and fitness in the off season as they do in competition. However, they shouldn't just completely experience reversibility and regress to like an average Joe, all right? So instead of doing our 5-6 training sessions a week, they should probably do, 2 or 3 training sessions a week just to maintain, right? And if they lose a little bit, that's okay, but they don't need to develop anything unless, well, there's specific needs with that if you're changing weight categories and positions, but I'll talk about that in another video. So they do need to maintain some fitness, but not as much as what was required in season, all right? The elite athletes must also be rested to allow peaking on comp days, all right? So rested doesn't mean have 3 or 4 days off and then you participate in competition. Rested simply means that you have that day or a day and a half prior to your competition to recover, okay? And remember, elite athletes have good recovery because everything they do in their life is pretty much optimized towards performance, all right? It's not just like you and me who try really hard and we think we've got recovery down, but we don't sleep well and we don't eat well sometimes. Elite athletes are different. They're paid to sleep well. They're paid to eat well. They get, dietitians and nutritionists, and they get like CPAP machines hooked up to their noses to ensure they get like 10 hours of good quality sleep. Anyway, I digress. Elite athletes also, as I mentioned earlier, need to consider all performance events in the year so that pre-planned training blocks can be done by the coach. So the coach will sit down in January and map out the whole year for the team, for the athlete, etc. They're not just doing it on a week-by-week basis as to what a coach might do for an amateur or recreational athlete. So that's how our schedule of events and competition impacts our planning. All right, so our last dash is looking at climate and season, all right? Coaches need to consider the current climate and season when planning training sessions, all right? So when you're looking at mapping out your year or mapping out your week, well, probably not on a week because we know climate and season changes, but you can still do it on a weekly basis depending on weather, coaches need to make sure that they make appropriate plans to ensure that their athletes, one, can get the best out of their training, improving their performance and also maintaining their current levels, but two, ensuring athletes' safety. And the safety reason is why most of these things that I'm about to talk about apply to both amateur and elite athletes equally. So the first thing is that coaches need to take into account the weather, and then I wrote in brackets and potential. So the potential weather. So if you're looking at NRL teams, right, they play in the winter seasons. Here in winter seasons, there's only one winter season. They play in the winter months. In Australia, they need to have basically every single training session a backup area in case it's absolutely pouring rain, all right? Or if there's thunder and all that kind of stuff, etc. So the coach will obviously book the main venue they want to be doing, e.g. local oval or whatever, but also at the same time they need to have something in the back. So maybe an indoor centre, or they'll do a different session in like maybe an indoor pool, or just having a backup option in case weather impedes the original plan. So therefore, a coach will book appropriate spaces or venues to allow effective training, but also allow athlete safety. And that is equally important for amateur and elite athletes. Examples: indoor or aircon space in hot or humid or rainy conditions, scheduling more pool sessions in summer, or scheduling sessions in the morning or afternoons in summer so you avoid that midday heat, etc. So the second one we're going to look at here is acclimatisation. Now I covered acclimatisation within your core work, so you may need to go back through that. So acclimatisation needs to be part of this initial planning considerations, mainly for elite athletes only, okay? To enable maximum performance on competition day, right? And the example currently relevant, the Australian Olympic team travelling to Japan 6 weeks prior to their events to acclimatise, all right? So if you remember back about your acclimatisation stuff, if an athlete is not acclimatised, it may make them a little bit short on oxygen, it may make them lethargic, tired, which can all end up in injury, but also lower performance. So by acclimatising to that current climate, or levels of pollution, or levels of pollen, and all the things that affect the climate, the athlete can therefore perform to their best ability on the day. And our last one is looking at clothing, hydration, etc. So coaches should always ensure that athlete teamwear or the uniform is appropriate for the climate and season, all right? So e.g., you're not playing in like long sleeve pants and long sleeve jumpers in summer, and vice versa. If you're going in the pool, you probably want to have minimal coverage to ensure that you can not only move freely but also just staying cool in those summer type sports. And we're going to ensure that adequate hydration is important as well, because both appropriate teamwear and appropriate hydration, they both avoid the likelihood of health issues being experienced by the athletes, e.g. dehydration, hypothermia, heat stroke, that type of stuff, hypothermia, etc. And that is, once again, equally important to amateur and elite athletes. So that's why climate and season is important in our initial planning considerations, and that's the end of this video. Thanks, bye.